My husband walked through the door holding a bouquet of wilted carnations and a smile that reeked of toxic charity. He asked if I had taken my anxiety medication, his voice dripping with that fake, suffocating concern he used to mask his contempt. He thought he was managing a fragile, broken woman, someone who needed his constant, saintly guidance just to function in the suburbs. He didn't know that while he was performing the role of the benevolent caretaker, I had just finished cataloging the $17,000 he spent on a secret life. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. It started with a plastic rectangle and a look of absolute pity from a man who usually only looked at me to complain about my recycling bins. Harold, my neighbor 2 doors down, is the kind of guy who measures his grass height with a ruler. He is 63, a retired naval officer, and he treats the Homeowners Association guidelines like the Geneva Convention. Usually, when I see him marching across his pristine lawn toward my driveway, my heart rate spikes because I assume I violated some obscure statute regarding decorative rocks or the placement of my garden hose. But on this particular Tuesday, his walk was different. It lacked his usual militaristic bounce. He looked heavy. He looked like he was carrying the weight of a sinking ship on his shoulders. I was standing by the mailbox, wrestling with a stack of bills and a flyer for a pizza place we never order from. I remember the sun was hitting the asphalt hard, that baking Texas heat that makes everything shimmer. But when Harold stopped in front of me, the air felt instantly cold. He didn't say hello. He didn't comment on the weather or ask about the new hydrangeas I'd planted near the porch. He just reached into the pocket of his windbreaker, which he was wearing despite it being 85 degrees, and pulled out a black USB flash drive. "Clara," he said. His voice was tight, clipped, stripped of any neighborly pleasantries. I looked at the drive, then up at his face. He was avoiding eye contact, staring somewhere past my left ear at the siding of my house. "What is this, Harold? Did I miss a meeting?" I tried to laugh, but the sound came out brittle. My stomach did a weird flip, that primal instinct that kicks in right before a car accident. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a flash drive. Maybe it was photos from the block party last year. Maybe it was a digital copy of the new bylaws. "I need you to watch this," he said, finally meeting my eyes. I didn't want to get involved. I really didn't. But I have been documenting some activity on the street for the security committee. The security committee. Right. Harold had installed high-definition cameras on his eaves 6 months ago after a teenager knocked over a few mailboxes. We all joked that he was building a command center. "Activity?" I asked. The word felt heavy in my mouth. "Just watch it," he interrupted, pressing the drive into my palm. His hand was warm, dry, and shaking slightly. That was the detail that terrified me. Harold does not shake. Harold disarms bombs or whatever he did in the Navy. He does not tremble over a flash drive. It is about Preston. The name landed between us like a dead bird. Preston, my husband, my partner of 8 years, the man who was currently at work selling sedans to families and texting me about dinner plans. "I am sorry," Harold added, and the way he said it, quiet, final, devastating, shattered my last hope that this was about a noise complaint. "I am truly sorry, Clara." He turned and walked away before I could ask a single question. He marched back to his fortress of solitude, leaving me standing on the hot pavement holding a piece of plastic that felt radioactive. I looked down at it. It was small, harmless looking, a generic black stick. But my thumb brushed against the metal connector, and I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to grab the mailbox post to keep from falling over. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to scream at him to take it back, to tell me he was joking, to accuse me of leaving my trash cans out too late. I wanted any conversation other than the one we just didn't have. But I didn't move. I just stood there, gripping the evidence of my own destruction, while the sprinkler system next door hissed to life. I walked into my house, and the silence hit me like a physical blow. Usually, I love the quiet of the afternoons. I work from home as a data analyst, and the solitude is usually my focus time. But today, the silence felt expectant. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to shatter the illusion of our happy life. I went straight to my office, a converted guest room at the back of the house that overlooks the backyard. I sat down at my desk and placed the flash drive in the center of the blotter. Then I just stared at it. My brain kicked into overdrive, spinning out 1,000 impossible scenarios to explain why my neighbor would hand me a drive about my husband. Maybe Preston was in trouble. Maybe he was gambling. Maybe he was involved in something illegal at the dealership. My mind desperately grabbed onto these disasters because, strangely, they felt manageable. I could deal with gambling debt. I could deal with a legal crisis. We were a team. We would solve it. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, where the nausea was currently setting up camp, I knew it wasn't gambling. I knew exactly what it was. I had known it for months, hadn't I? In the way he guarded his phone. In the way he showered immediately when he got home. In the late meetings that never showed up on his paycheck as overtime. I had just been too cowardly to look at the data. I was an analyst who refused to analyze her own marriage. I reached for the drive, then pulled my hand back as if it were hot iron. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "Not yet." I stood up. I couldn't do it. I couldn't blow up my life at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. I needed to do something else first, anything else. I went to the kitchen. The granite countertops were slightly dusty. I grabbed the spray cleaner and a rag and started scrubbing. I scrubbed until my knuckles turned white. I scrubbed a spot of dried coffee near the sink that had been there for 3 days. I focused entirely on the friction, the chemical smell of the lemon cleaner, the repetitive motion of my arm. If I clean the kitchen, everything is fine, I told myself. It was a magical thinking bargaining chip. If I empty the dishwasher, Preston loves me. If I wipe down the cabinets, Harold is a liar. I organized the spice rack. I threw away 3 expired yogurts. I took the trash out to the garage. I was manic, moving with a frenetic energy that terrified me. I was trying to outrun the truth sitting on my desk. But every time I stopped moving, the image of Harold's face flashed in my mind. The pity, the absolute certainty in his eyes. He wasn't a gossip. He wasn't a stirrer. He was a man of facts, and he had given me data. I looked at the microwave clock. It was 2:45. Preston would be home in 3 hours. 3 hours to live in ignorance, or 3 hours to prepare for war. I dropped the dish rag into the sink. It made a wet, heavy slap sound that echoed in the empty kitchen. I couldn't hide in the chores anymore. I walked back to the office, my legs feeling like they were moving through wet concrete. I sat down. I took a deep breath that shuddered in my chest. "Okay," I said. "Okay." I picked up the drive and plugged it into the side of my laptop. The computer chimed, a cheerful, optimistic little ding that sounded completely inappropriate for the moment. A folder window popped up on the screen. It was labeled simply, "Documentation." My hand hovered over the trackpad. The cursor was a tiny white arrow posing innocently over a folder that contained the end of my world. I hesitated again. I thought about the dinner I was planning to make tonight. Chicken marsala. I thought about the vacation we had booked for October, a cabin in the Smokies. If I double-clicked this folder, did the cabin trip disappear? Did the chicken marsala rot in the fridge? Yes, everything disappears. I clicked. The folder opened to reveal a list of video files. There were dozens of them. They were named methodically in military date format, year, month, day, time. The first one was dated March 15th. March. That was 6 months ago. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Harold had been watching for 6 months? Why hadn't he told me sooner? Or maybe, why had he waited until he had so much? I clicked the first file. A media player opened. The screen was black for a second, and then the image resolved. It was a high-angle shot of the street, crisp and clear. Harold really had spent a fortune on these cameras. The timestamp in the corner read, 14:15. 2:15 in the afternoon. I watched as Preston's silver BMW turned into our driveway. I leaned in, squinting. Why was he home? March 15th was a Thursday. He worked on Thursdays. He always told me Thursdays were his busiest days for fleet sales. The car stopped. The engine cut. But Preston didn't get out immediately. The passenger door opened first. A woman stepped out. I didn't recognize her car, but I recognized her instantly. It was Samantha. Samantha from the garden club. Samantha, who lived 4 streets over in the blue colonial with the wraparound porch. Samantha, who had complimented my potato salad at the 4th of July picnic and asked me for the recipe. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the visual data. Why is Samantha in Preston's car? Maybe she needed a ride. Maybe her car broke down and he was being a good neighbor. But then Preston got out of the driver's side. He walked around the hood of the car. He didn't look like a man helping a neighbor. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He was wearing his suit jacket, but his tie was loosened. They met at the front of the car. And then, right there in my driveway, right there under the oak tree we had paid a fortune to have trimmed last year, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so intimate, so practiced, that it hurt more than if I had watched them having sex. Sex is an impulse. Tucking hair behind an ear is affection. It implies a history. It implies care. Samantha smiled up at him. I could see the way her face lit up. It was the way I used to look at him 5 years ago, before the mortgage and the IVF discussions and the silent dinners. He unlocked our front door. My front door. The door I had painted a controversial shade of terracotta because I thought it looked welcoming. He held it open for her, and she walked inside my house like she owned it. The video ended. I sat there, frozen. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator in the other room and the roaring of blood in my ears. They had been in my house. While I was at the corporate office downtown, sitting in meetings about quarterly projections, stressing over spreadsheets, my husband was bringing a woman into our home. I looked at the list of files again. There were 47 videos, 47 times. I felt a scream building in my throat, hot and jagged, but I clamped my mouth shut. I wouldn't scream. Not yet. I needed to see everything. I needed to know exactly how stupid I had been. I became a machine. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I turned off the part of my brain that felt pain and turned on the part that processed data. I am a senior analyst. I look for patterns. I look for anomalies. I look for the truth hidden in the numbers. And the truth was a horror show. I opened a blank spreadsheet on my second monitor. I started logging the metadata from Harold's files. Date, time in, time out, duration, notes. March 20th. The Motel 6 off the highway. Harold must have followed them for this one. The camera angle was from across the street, shaky, probably handheld. Preston's car, Samantha's red Honda. They went into room 114. They were inside for 90 minutes. I typed it out. March 20th, Motel 6, 90 minutes. I remembered March 20th. Preston had come home late. He said he had a flat tire. He said he had to wait for AAA. He even had grease on his hands. He must have rubbed it on himself intentionally. The level of calculation required to fake a flat tire while fresh from a motel room made my skin crawl. April 3rd. Lunch at that expensive Italian place downtown. The one we saved for anniversaries because it was too pricey for a regular Tuesday. I watched them sitting on the patio. They were laughing. They were sharing a dessert. He was feeding her a spoonful of tiramisu. I looked at our joint bank account history on my phone. April 3rd. A charge for $140 at Gino's. He had told me he took a client out. I have to spend money to make money, Clara, he had said when I asked about the bill. It's an investment. It was an investment, all right, just not in his career. May 12th. Target parking lot, Sunday morning. He said he was going to get hardware for the deck. He met her in row C. They sat in his car for an hour drinking coffee. I watched file after file. The sun moved across the floor of my office, stretching the shadows long and thin, but I didn't turn on a light. I sat in the gloom, illuminated only by the blue light of the monitor, witnessing the systematic dismantling of my reality. It wasn't just an affair. It was a parallel life. He wasn't just sleeping with her. He was dating her. He was listening to her. He was being the man I remembered falling in love with, but he was giving that version of himself to Samantha. I was getting the leftovers. I was getting the tired, irritable, don't nag me version of Preston. She was getting the let me tuck your hair back version. The sheer volume of time he stole from us was staggering. I summed up the duration column in my spreadsheet. Over the last 6 months, he had spent 112 hours with her. 112 hours. That's nearly 5 full days. I thought about all the times I asked him to watch a movie with me, and he said he was too busy. I thought about the times I asked him to help with the yard, and he said he was exhausted. He wasn't exhausted. He was just depleted from maintaining a second girlfriend. My hands were shaking as I typed. June 15th, my birthday. I clicked the video. He met her at a jewelry store. He bought her a bracelet. I saw him hand her the bag. She kissed him. On my birthday, he had given me a gift card to a bookstore. He said he didn't know what I wanted. He knew what she wanted. I felt a tear finally escape, hot and angry, tracking down my cheek. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was rage. Pure, distilled, high-octane rage. He had looked me in the eye on my birthday, handed me a $50 piece of plastic, and claimed ignorance, while he had just come from buying diamonds for his mistress. I wiped the tear away aggressively. I wouldn't cry for him. I would document him. I would verify every single second of his betrayal until I had a data set so undeniable that he would never be able to gaslight me again. I reached the last file in the folder. It was dated just 3 weeks ago. August 10th. The thumbnail showed them sitting at an outdoor table at a Starbucks. It looked like a typical coffee date. I almost didn't watch it. I felt like I had seen enough. I had the pattern. I had the proof. What was one more coffee date? But Harold had labeled this file differently. Instead of just the date, he had added a suffix. Critical. I double-clicked. The video played. The quality was excellent. Harold must have been sitting at the next table or using a zoom lens from a car. I could see the sweat on Preston's forehead. He looked nervous. He was shredding a napkin into tiny pieces. Samantha looked different here. She wasn't glowing. She looked serious. She was wearing a loose tunic top. She reached into her oversized purse. My breath hitched. What is she doing? Is she ending it? Is she giving him a letter? She pulled out a small, glossy black and white rectangle. I stopped breathing entirely. I know that shape. Every woman in her 30s who has spent years trying to conceive knows that shape. It is the Holy Grail. It is the object of 1,000 prayers and 1,000,000 tears. An ultrasound photo. She slid it across the metal table. I watched Preston. I watched the man who had told me repeatedly for the last 5 years that we weren't ready for kids. The man who said we needed more savings. The man who said the world was too unstable to bring a child into. He stared at the photo. He didn't look scared. He didn't look trapped. His face softened. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his lips. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. He squeezed it. He picked up the photo and held it like it was made of gold leaf. He was happy. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow to the chest. I actually gasped, a wet, choking sound in the quiet room. This wasn't just sex. This wasn't just an emotional affair. He had started a family. He had done the one thing with her that he had denied me. He had built a future, a legacy. He was going to be a father, but not with me. I looked down at my own stomach. Flat. Empty. The failure that I carried around every day. He had made me feel like My body was the problem. He had made me feel like we were the problem, but it wasn't us. It was me. He was perfectly capable of moving forward. He just didn't want to move forward with me. I paused the video on his smiling face. I zoomed in. I wanted to burn that expression into my memory. I wanted to remember exactly what he looked like when he was happy about destroying my life. I felt a shift inside me. Something fundamental broke, but it didn't shatter into a mess. It snapped into a sharp, jagged edge. Sadness evaporated. Grief vanished. In their place, a cold, hard resolve settled over me like a suit of armor. He had a baby on the way. That meant he had something to lose. That meant he had a timeline. That meant the clock was ticking. I checked the time on my computer. 5:15. The garage door rumbled beneath me. He was home. I closed the laptop. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently, deliberately. I pulled the flash drive out and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. I stood up and smoothed my hair. I looked in the mirror on the back of the door. My face was pale. My eyes were wide, the pupils blown. I looked like a ghost. I pinched my cheeks hard, trying to force some color back into them. I needed to look alive. I needed to look like the oblivious, trusting wife he expected to find. I heard the door from the garage open, the familiar thump click of the deadbolt. Ideally, I would have greeted him with a knife, or at least a lawsuit. But I wasn't ready. I didn't have the full financial picture yet. I needed access to his accounts. I needed to know how much of my money was funding their baby. "Clara?" His voice drifted up the stairs. "Honey, I'm home." The cheerfulness of it made me want to vomit. "Up here," I called back. My voice sounded thin, reedy. I cleared my throat. "Just finishing up work." I walked down the stairs. He was standing in the entryway, loosening his tie. He held a bouquet of grocery store carnations in one hand, wilted, sad-looking things that were probably marked down to $5. He smiled when he saw me. It was the smile, the one from the video, the one he gave Samantha, but dimmer, less voltage. "Hey," he said, holding out the flowers. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up. You've seemed a little stressed lately." I stopped on the bottom step. I looked at the flowers. Stressed. That was his favorite word for me. If I had an opinion, I was stressed. If I was suspicious, I was anxious. It was his way of dismissing my reality before I could even speak it. "Thank you," I said, taking the flowers. They felt slimy in my hand. "That's thoughtful." He leaned in and kissed my cheek. I had to force every muscle in my body not to recoil. I smelled him. Beneath the expensive cologne, I smelled something else. Vanilla, coconut. It was her lotion. I was sure of it. "Did you have a good day?" he asked, walking past me into the kitchen. He opened the fridge and grabbed a sparkling water. "I had a hell of a time with the inventory audit. Gerald is riding my ass about the numbers." Liar, I thought. "You were with her. You were planning the nursery." "My day was fine," I said, watching him. "Just data entry. Boring stuff." He turned and looked at me. Really looked at me. His brow furrowed. The mask of the concerned husband slid into place. "Are you sure you're okay, babe?" he asked, tilting his head. "Your eyes look a little manic." "Did you take your meds today?" There it was. The toxic benevolence, the weaponized concern. He wasn't asking because he cared. He was asking to undermine my stability. If I was manic, then anything I said or did could be dismissed. If I accused him, it was just my anxiety talking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the wilted carnations in his face and tell him I'd seen the ultrasound. I wanted to tell him I knew about the 112 hours. But if I did that now, he would spin it. He would cry. He would blame the stress. He would hide the money. He would delete the emails. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the analyst. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a smile. It felt like stretching rubber. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. I think I'm coming down with something." "Oh, honey," he cooed, stepping forward to rub my arm. His touch made my skin crawl. "You work too hard. You really need to learn to relax. Why don't you go lie down? I'll order pizza. You shouldn't be cooking when you're fragile." Fragile? I looked at his hand on my arm, the same hand that had held hers over the ultrasound photo. "Maybe you're right," I said softly. "I'll go lie down." I turned and walked back upstairs, leaving him in the kitchen with his sparkling water and his secrets. I didn't go to the bedroom to sleep. I went to the bedroom to find the key to his filing cabinet. If he thought I was fragile, he was about to learn exactly how much weight a broken woman could carry before she dropped it on his head. That night was an endurance sport. Preston came up to bed at 10:30. He smelled like toothpaste and self-righteousness. I was already under the duvet, curled on my side, facing the window, feigning sleep with the dedication of a method actor. I focused on my breathing, slow, rhythmic, heavy, while my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The mattress dipped as he climbed in. The shift in gravity felt massive, like the earth tilting on its axis. He sighed, a long, contented sound that scraped against my nerves. "Good night, babe," he whispered. He reached out and draped his arm over my waist. His hand rested on my stomach. My stomach dropped. I stopped breathing. I had to. If I breathed, I would scream. His hand felt heavy, hot, possessive. It was the same hand that had touched Samantha, the same hand that had signed credit card receipts for motel rooms. It felt like a branding iron. I wanted to shove him away. I wanted to roll over and claw his face, but I didn't. I lay perfectly still, letting him hold the wife he thought he had, while the wife he actually had plotted his financial ruin. "Get off me!" I screamed in the silence of my own skull. "Get your lying, cheating hands off me." Eventually, his breathing deepened. The heavy, rhythmic snore that used to comfort me, a sign he was home and safe, now sounded like a taunt. He was sleeping. He was peaceful. He had a pregnant girlfriend and a clueless wife, and he was sleeping like a baby. I stared at the moonlight filtering through the blinds. I counted the slats. 1, 2, 3. I counted the cracks in the ceiling paint. I replayed the videos in my head. The kiss, the ultrasound, the way he opened the door for her. I didn't sleep. Not for a minute. I lay there for 7 hours, marinating in a toxic stew of grief and adrenaline, waiting for the sun to rise so I could stop pretending to be unconscious and start destroying him. Preston left for work at 7:45. He kissed my forehead. I flinched, but blamed a headache, and told me to take it easy. As soon as his BMW backed out of the driveway, the clock started ticking. I had roughly 9 hours. I went straight to his home office. It was a chaotic mess of papers, car brochures, and golf magazines. Preston wasn't organized like me. He relied on charm, not systems. But he had one system I knew about, the Black Notebook. He was paranoid about cloud hackers, so he wrote all his passwords in a small moleskin notebook he kept somewhere. I started with the desk drawers. Pens, paper clips, breath mints, nothing. I checked the bookshelf. Behind the rows of business books he never read. Nothing. Panic started to prickle at my hairline. Think, Clara, think. Where does he hide things? I went to the filing cabinet in the corner. It was locked. Of course it was locked. Damn it, I hissed, kicking the metal base. I didn't have a key. He kept the key on his keyring. The keyring that was currently driving down the highway to the dealership. I looked around the room, desperate. I grabbed a letter opener from the desk. I tried to jam it into the lock. It didn't fit. I jiggled it. I twisted it. The metal bent. Useless. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a wire coat hanger from the laundry room closet. I untwisted it until my fingers were raw. I ran back upstairs. I felt like a criminal in my own house. I was sweating. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wire. Come on, come on. I fished around inside the lock mechanism. I had seen this in movies. It looked easy. It wasn't easy. It was just scratching and frustration. I spent 20 minutes poking a piece of wire into a hole, cursing Preston, cursing the cabinet, cursing myself for not paying attention for 8 years. Then I stopped. I took a breath. He's not a mastermind, he's lazy. If the key wasn't on his ring, where was the spare? I looked at the top of the door frame. I ran my fingers along the ledge. Dust. I looked at the potted plant in the corner, a fake ficus. I lifted the pot. There, taped to the bottom of the ceramic saucer with a piece of blue painter's tape, was a small silver key. "Got you," I whispered. I peeled the tape off. I jammed the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying clack. I pulled the drawer open. Hanging files. Tax returns. Insurance policies. And there, tucked in the back behind a folder labeled Warranties, was the black notebook. I grabbed it. I flipped through the pages. It was a mess of scribbles, email passwords, Netflix logins, and then, on a page near the back, banking. He had written, User P. Harrington, 82. Pass, Mustang Sales 2019. Mustang Sales, I read aloud. You absolute cliché. I sat down at his computer. I didn't use mine. I didn't want the cookies to track back to me if he checked. I typed in the username. I typed in the password. My finger hovered over the enter key. This was the point of no return. Once I saw the numbers, the reality would be concrete. I pressed enter. The screen loaded slowly, the little spinning circle mocking my heart rate. Then, the dashboard appeared. I gasped. I literally gasped, a sharp intake of air that hurt my lungs. The checking account balance was $412. $400. It should have been $5,000. We had just deposited our tax refund last month. Where was the refund? I clicked on Transactions. The list populated, and it was a sea of red. August 12th, transfer to Venmo, $500. August 10th, Star Jewelers, $1,200. August 5th, cash withdrawal, $300. I scrolled down and down and down. It wasn't just small leaks. It was a hemorrhage. He was paying for everything, not just motels. He was paying for her car insurance. I saw a recurring payment to Geico that didn't match our policy number. He was paying for her phone bill. I pulled up the credit card statement. The joint Visa we were supposed to use for emergencies. The balance was $14,000, maxed out. I clicked the statement details. Nordstrom, $300. Sephora, $150. The Ritz-Carlton Spa, $400. I stared at the spa charge, May 22nd. I remembered that day. I had come home with a migraine, and Preston had told me to take a Tylenol and push through because he needed his shirts ironed. While I was ironing his shirts with a pounding headache, he was treating Samantha to a $400 spa day on my R credit. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. It wasn't just the betrayal of the sex, it was the financial violence. He was stealing my labor. He was taking the hours I worked, the stress I endured, the life I was building, and he was liquidating it to buy luxury for another woman. I opened Excel. I needed to total this. I needed the exact number. I typed furiously. Every charge, every withdrawal, every suspicious transfer. Motel 6 charges, $1,400 total. Dining out, $3,200. Gifts retail, $5,600. Cash transfers, $6,800. I highlighted the sum cell. $17,042. $17,000 in 6 months. That was a down payment on a rental property. That was a new car. That was our safety net. Gone. Vaporized into perfume and motel sheets. I sat back in his chair. I felt hollowed out. I looked at the number until it blurred. $17,000. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had robbed me. The house was hot. I hadn't noticed it while I was in the trance of forensic accounting, but now that I stopped typing, the air felt heavy and thick. I looked at the thermostat on the wall. It read 82 degrees. I frowned. It was set to 72. I walked over and tapped the screen. Nothing happened. The fan wasn't running. The vent above me was silent. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I went to the utility closet and checked the breaker. It was fine. I toggled it anyway. Nothing. The AC unit outside was silent. Panic, real and sharp, spiked in my chest. It is August in Texas. You cannot live without AC. It is a biological impossibility. I called the repair company we used, the one with the sticker on the unit. "We can have someone out in an hour," the dispatcher said. "Emergency fee is $150 just to look at it." "Fine," I said. "Just send them." The technician, a guy named Dave who looked like he had seen too many broken compressors in his life, arrived 40 minutes later. He spent 10 minutes outside, then came in, wiping grease on a rag. "Capacitor's blown," Dave said, looking at his clipboard, "and your compressor is hard starting. You need a hard start kit and a new capacitor, plus the labor." "How much?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched behind my back. "With the emergency call-out, you're looking at about $650. $650. I looked at Dave. I looked at the thermostat that now read 84. Normally, I would just hand him the card. The joint visa. But the joint visa was maxed out, and the checking account had $400 in it. I couldn't pay him. I stood in my own hallway, a woman with a 6-figure job, a nice house, and a husband who drove a BMW, and I realized I was broke. I was destitute because my husband had spent our AC repair money on a bracelet for his mistress. My throat closed up. Shame burned hot in my cheeks. "I think I need to check with my husband first. Can you bill us?" Dave shook his head. "Sorry, ma'am. Payment on completion for new customers." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Dave that my husband was a thief. Instead, I pulled out my personal credit card, the one I kept for work expenses that Preston didn't have access to. "Take this one," I said, handing it over. As he ran the card, I felt a shift. The sadness from the bedroom was gone. The shock from the bank account was gone. Now, there was only calculation. He let me sweat, I thought. He left me with no money to fix the air conditioning in 100-degree heat. He left me vulnerable. I signed the digital pad. Dave left. The AC hummed to life. Cool air started to flow. But I didn't cool down. I was burning up with a new kind of fuel. 2 days later, on Thursday evening, I put on a floral sundress and drove to the community center. It was the monthly meeting of the Meadowbrook Garden Club. Normally, I loved these meetings. It was a chance to drink Pinot Grigio and complain about aphids with the other women in the neighborhood. Today, it felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a steak necklace, because she would be there. Samantha never missed a meeting. She was the secretary. She took the minutes. I parked my car. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. I looked tired but presentable. I had put on extra concealer to hide the dark circles from 3 nights of sleeping next to the enemy. "You can do this," I told my reflection. "You are a spy, you are undercover. Gather intelligence." I walked into the hall. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. There were about 20 women milling around holding plastic cups of wine. And there she was. Samantha was standing by the sign-in table. She was wearing a loose, flowing white blouse, hiding the bump, I realized instantly, and she looked radiant. Her hair was shiny. Her skin was clear. She was laughing at something old Mrs. Higgins was saying. She looked like the innocent heroine of a romance novel. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. It took every ounce of willpower not to walk over there and slap the clipboard out of her hand. But I didn't. I forced a smile onto my face, a wide, bright, brittle smile. "Clara," someone called out. It was Brenda, the club president. "So glad you made it. We missed you last month." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. I walked toward the table. I walked toward the woman who was carrying my husband's child. Samantha looked up. Her eyes met mine. For a split second, I saw it. A flicker. A tiny microscopic flinch of guilt, or maybe fear. But then it was gone, replaced by a mask of sweet neighborly affection. "Clara," she chirped. "Hi, how are you?" She reached out to hug me. I let her. I let the woman who was sleeping with my husband wrap her arms around me. She smelled like vanilla and coconut, the same smell that was on Preston's jacket. "I'm great," I lied, pulling back. "Just busy. You know how it is." "Oh, I do," she said, touching her stomach unconsciously, then quickly dropping her hand. "Life is just crazy right now." "You have no idea," I thought. "But you will." We moved to the refreshment table. I poured myself a glass of wine. I noticed Samantha had a cup of water. "No wine tonight?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Usually you love the Pinot." She smiled, a tight, secretive little smile. "Oh, I'm doing a cleanse," she said. "Just trying to flush out the toxins. My naturopath said I need to reset my system." A cleanse. The universal code for "I'm pregnant but not ready to tell people." "That's so admirable," I said. "I wish I had your discipline." She tilted her head, looking at me with those big, dewy eyes. Then she dropped the bomb. The toxic benevolence bomb. "You look tired, Clara," she said softly. She lowered her voice so the other women wouldn't hear. "Is everything okay at home? You seem a little worn out." I gripped my plastic wine cup so hard it cracked. "Worn out?" I repeated. "Just, you know," she sighed. "I know how hard you've been working. And well, I know you guys have been trying for a baby for a long time. That kind of stress really ages a person, doesn't it?" My vision went red at the edges. She was pitying me. She was standing there, pregnant with my husband's baby, pitying me for being infertile and old. It was a masterclass in cruelty disguised as empathy. "It can be stressful," I managed to say, "but we're hopeful. Preston is so supportive." I watched her face when I said his name. "He is," she agreed, her voice dropping another octave. "He's such a good man. You're lucky to have him." "I am," I said, taking a sip of wine to hide the snarl forming on my lips. "I'm very lucky. In fact, I'm planning something special for him, for the neighborhood block party." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh? What kind of special?" "Just a surprise," I said. "A celebration of our life here. You should definitely come. It wouldn't be the same without our closest neighbors." I looked her dead in the eye. "I'll be there," she said. "I love a good party." "Great," I said, "because this one is going to be unforgettable." I walked away before I threw my wine in her face. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I stared at myself in the mirror. I was shaking, but I wasn't crying. I had the invite list. I had the venue. And now I had the confirmation that she was a sociopath who enjoyed watching me squirm. "Game on, Samantha," I whispered to the mirror. "Enjoy your cleanse, because you're about to have a lot of free time to focus on your health." The drive home from the community center took 4 minutes, but my hands were shaking so hard I had to pull over 2 streets away from our house. I parked under a flickering street lamp and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She pitied me. The thought looped in my brain like a corrupted file. Samantha, the woman stealing my husband, the woman incubating his child, had looked at me with those doe eyes and offered me sympathy for my fragility. She had weaponized my own pain against me. She wasn't just a mistress, she was a predator who liked to play with her food. I stared at the dashboard clock. 8:45. Preston would be home soon. He had texted me earlier saying he was closing a deal and would be late. I knew what kind of deal he was closing. He was probably with her right now, debriefing the garden club meeting, laughing about how oblivious I was. "Poor Clara," I imagined them saying. "She's so worn out. Maybe we should put her out of her misery." A dry, hacking laugh escaped my throat. It sounded terrifying in the small car. "Oh, you're going to put me out of my misery?" I whispered to the empty passenger seat. "No, I'm going to put you on a projector screen." The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. What remained was a cold, crystalline clarity. I wasn't just going to leave him. I wasn't just going to divorce him. I was going to dismantle him. I was going to take apart his life brick by brick, his job, his reputation, his finances, and I was going to make him watch. I put the car in drive. I didn't speed. I drove the speed limit. I used my blinker. I was a law-abiding citizen. I was a good neighbor. I was the perfect wife driving home to her cheating husband to cook him a late dinner while mentally drafting the email that would end his career. I spent the next morning in my home office, but I wasn't working on data analytics for my actual job. I was designing an invitation. I opened a graphic design program and selected a template. Something festive. Balloons. Barbecue grills. It needed to look innocent. It needed to look like every other suburban block party flyer that gets taped to mailboxes and ignored. "Annual Labor Day block party," I typed. "The Harrington House. Saturday, September 2nd, noon." I stared at the screen. My cursor blinked at the end of the line. I needed a hook. I needed something that would ensure attendance. If people just thought it was burgers and cheap beer, they might flake. They might go to the lake. I needed them here. I needed witnesses. I added a text box in bold red letters. Special community presentation, neighborhood safety, and the future of Meadowbrook. It was vague enough to sound important, but boring enough to be plausible. Preston would think it was about the neighborhood watch. He loved feeling important. He would think it was his moment to shine. I printed 40 copies on heavy cardstock. The printer hummed and clicked, a rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown. Who gets one? Everyone. The Hendersons, the Millers, old Mrs. Higgins, and, of course, Samantha. I hand-addressed an envelope to the occupant at her address. I didn't want to write her name. I felt like if I wrote her name, the pen might catch fire. I walked to the mailbox. The sun was beating down, that relentless Texas heat that makes the asphalt shimmer. I walked down the street, sliding envelopes into mailboxes. It felt mundane. It felt evil. I reached her house, the blue colonial. It looked perfect. A wreath on the door. A welcome mat. I stood at the end of her driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if she sees me? What if she comes out? I visualized walking up to the door and confronting her. I know about the baby. I know about the ultrasound. But that would be messy. That would be emotional. She would cry. She would play the victim. She would say she didn't know he was married, or that he told her we were separated. Lies. All lies. I needed the evidence to speak for itself. I slid the invite into her mailbox. The metal flag clanked down. "You love a good party, right?" I whispered. "I hope you like horror movies." Monday morning, Phase 2. I called in sick to my job. Migraine, I told my manager. It wasn't a lie. My head had been throbbing for 6 days straight, a tension headache that felt like a vice clamped around my temples. I dressed carefully, not my usual work-from-home leggings. I put on a navy blazer, tailored slacks, and heels. I needed to look like money. I needed to look like a serious woman who manages serious assets. I drove to Thompson Motors. It was on the other side of town, a sprawling lot of asphalt and flags. Preston's BMW was parked near the front. Seeing it gave me a jolt of nausea. He was inside. He was probably drinking coffee, joking with the other salesman, completely unaware that his executioner was parking a Toyota Camry in the visitor lot. I grabbed the manila folder from the passenger seat. Inside were the spreadsheets, the financial audit I had created from the stolen login, the rows of red ink, the proof that he wasn't just cheating on me, he was cheating on them. I walked into the showroom, The air conditioning was frigid. It smelled of rubber tires and popcorn. A young salesman in a suit that was too big for him intercepted me immediately. "Can I help you find something today, ma'am? We have great deals on the 2024 models." "I'm here to see Gregory Thompson," I said, my voice clipped. "Is he in?" The kid blinked. Mr. Thompson, do you have an appointment?" "I'm Clara Harrington, Preston's wife." I flashed a tight, impatient smile. "I have some tax documents Preston left at home. It's regarding the commission audit. He said I should bring them directly to Gregory to avoid any delays." I held my breath. It was a gamble. I didn't know if there was a commission audit. I just knew car dealerships were always auditing something. The kid's face cleared. "Oh, Preston's wife. Wow. Yeah, he's in his office. Back corner. Want me to get Preston?" "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. I forced myself to slow down. "No, don't bother him. He's with a client. I saw him. I just want to drop this off and run. I'm double parked." "Sure thing," the kid said, losing interest. "Go right ahead." I walked past the cubicles. I saw the back of Preston's head 3 rows over. He was on the phone, laughing. He was spinning a pen in his fingers. He looked so carefree, so light. "Enjoy it," I thought. "That's the last time you laugh in this building." I reached the glass door at the back labeled Gregory Thompson, General Manager. I knocked once and opened it without waiting. Gregory Thompson looked exactly like a man who owned a car dealership. He was 60, tan, with silver hair and a gold watch that probably cost more than my car. He was eating a salad at his desk. He looked up, annoyed. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Thompson," I said, stepping inside and closing the door firmly behind me. "I'm Clara Harrington, Preston's wife." His expression shifted from annoyance to politician smooth. "Clara? Well, this is a surprise. Preston didn't say you were stopping by. Is everything all right?" "No," I said. I didn't sit down. I walked straight to his desk and placed the folder on top of his salad container. "Everything is not all right." He put his fork down. The politician mask slipped a little. "What's this?" "I'm a data analyst, Mr. Thompson," I said. My voice was steady, robotic. I was channeling every ounce of professional detachment I possessed. "I handle compliance for a tech firm. Last week I was reviewing our personal finances for a mortgage refinance, and I found some anomalies." "Anomalies?" He frowned. "Preston has been using the joint credit card for expenses he claimed were reimbursable business costs," I said. "Client dinners, hotel stays for training seminars. But when I cross-referenced them with his pay stubs, there were no reimbursements." Gregory leaned back. "Clara, if you're having marital problems—" "This isn't about my marriage," I cut him off. "This is about your money." I opened the folder. "Here," I pointed to a highlighted row. "March 12th, $300 at the steakhouse." He claimed this was a dinner with the fleet manager from Enterprise, but I checked his calendar. He was marked as out sick that day. Gregory looked at the paper. He put on a pair of reading glasses. And here, I flipped the page, the corporate card. I found a receipt in his laundry for a charge on the company Amex, a hotel room in Austin, on a Tuesday afternoon. Does Thompson Motors pay for nap time? Gregory went still. The air in the office changed. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was dangerous. "The corporate card," Gregory said slowly. "He told me he lost that receipt." "He didn't lose it," I said. "He threw it away. I dug it out of the trash." I didn't tell him I got the data from a neighbor's spy camera. I stuck to the financial narrative. Money was the language men like Gregory understood. Adultery was a sin. Embezzlement was a crime. "There's about $11,000 in questionable charges here, Mr. Thompson," I said. "Hotels, dinners, gifts. None of it client-related unless your clients prefer Victoria's Secret to floor mats." Gregory stared at the spreadsheet. His face turned a deep, alarming shade of red. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the numbers. 11,000, he muttered. "Give or take," I said. I thought you should know. Before the quarterly audit finds it and you get dragged into it. I turned to leave. My legs felt like jelly. I needed to get out before I vomited on his carpet. "Clara?" he said. I stopped at the door. "Thank you," he said. His voice was cold, hard. "I'll handle it." "I know you will," I said. I walked out. I walked past Preston's cubicle again. He was still on the phone. He didn't see me. I walked out to the parking lot, got into my car, and drove 3 blocks before I started hyperventilating. Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on the couch with a book I wasn't reading, waiting. I knew it was happening. I could feel it in the air pressure. At 2:30, the garage door opened. He was early. Hours early. I marked the page in my book. I took a deep breath. Showtime. The door opened. Preston walked in. He was carrying a cardboard box, the universal symbol of corporate death. He looked shell-shocked. His tie was undone. His face was pale, clammy. He looked like a man who had just walked away from a plane crash. He set the box on the kitchen island. It contained a stapler, a framed photo of us, the one from our wedding, irony noted, and a dying succulent. "Preston," I stood up, infusing my voice with confusion. "What are you doing home? Is everything okay?" He looked at me. His eyes were wide, panicked. For a second, I thought he knew. I thought Gregory had told him Clara was here. "They fired me," he whispered. My heart gave a little leap of joy, a dark, twisted somersault. "What?" I rushed over to him. I grabbed his arm. "Fired? Who? Why?" "Gregory," he said, his voice shaking. "He called me in. He started screaming about the corporate card, about expenses." "But why?" I asked, widening my eyes. "You use that card for business." "I know," he shouted, throwing his hands up. "That's what I told him. He said there were irregularities. He said I was stealing." "Stealing?" I gasped. "That's ridiculous. You've worked there for 6 years." "He's crazy, Clara," Preston said, pacing the kitchen. "He's lost his mind. He pulled up all these old receipts, stuff from months ago. He claimed I was using it for personal stuff." He looked at me, pleading for me to believe him, pleading for me to validate his lie. "I mean, maybe I mixed up a receipt or two," he stammered. "You know how chaotic it gets. But to fire me? On the spot? Without a warning? That is so unfair," I said. I sounded so convincing I almost scared myself. "Did you explain it to him?" "He wouldn't listen," Preston said. "He threatened to call the police, Clara. The police, over a few receipts." $11,000 isn't a few receipts, Preston, I thought. It's grand larceny. "Oh my God," I said, covering my mouth. "What are we going to do? The mortgage?" He stopped pacing. He slumped against the counter. The reality was hitting him. No job, no commission, and a pregnant girlfriend waiting in the wings who expected him to support a baby. "I don't know," he said. He looked small, defeated. "I really don't know." I walked over to him. This was the hardest part, the part where I had to touch him. I wrapped my arms around his waist. I rested my head on his chest. I could hear his heart beating fast, a frantic rhythm of fear. "We'll figure it out," I said softly. "You don't need them. They didn't appreciate you anyway." He sagged into me. He hugged me back, burying his face in my hair. "I messed up, Clara," he mumbled into my neck. "I really messed up." "Shh," I soothed, rubbing his back. "It was just a mistake, an accounting error. We can fight it." "No," he said quickly. "No fighting. I need to find something else. Fast." "You will," I said. "You're a great salesman. Everyone knows that." I pulled back and looked at him. I reached up and smoothed his hair, mimicking the gesture he had used on Samantha in the video. "Hey," I said, "look at me. We are a team. We will get through this, okay?" He nodded, tears swimming in his eyes. "Okay. Thank you, Clara. You're amazing. I don't deserve you." "No," I thought. "You really don't." "Why don't you go upstairs and change?" I suggested. "Take a shower, wash off the day, I'll make us a drink." "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, that sounds good." He grabbed his box of shame and trudged toward the stairs. I watched him go. As soon as he was out of sight, I walked to the pantry. I pulled out the bottle of expensive scotch he had been saving for a special occasion. I poured myself a glass. Neat. I took a sip. It burned, hot and clean. He thought I was his safety net. He thought I was the one thing in his life that wasn't crumbling. He didn't know I was the demolition crew. I checked my phone. I had a text from the neighborhood listserv. Invite sent. Annual Labor Day block party. 3 days. I had 3 days to keep him calm. 3 days to play the role of the supportive, doting wife. And then, on Saturday at noon, I would burn the rest of it to the ground. Wednesday afternoon. The house was quiet, a fragile kind of silence that felt like glass about to shatter. Preston was upstairs networking on LinkedIn, which mostly involved him aggressively typing and sighing loudly enough for me to hear from the kitchen. He wanted me to go up there and comfort him. He wanted me to bring him a sandwich and tell him he was a visionary. I stayed downstairs and cleaned the grout on the backsplash with a toothbrush. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I stared at it. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I don't get calls from unknown numbers. Telemarketers, maybe? Or maybe the credit card company calling about the $14,000. I picked it up. Hello? Is this Clara? The voice was male, deep, and sounded like it was being dragged through gravel. It wasn't a telemarketer. Yes, I said, my grip tightening on the toothbrush. Who is this? This is Connor, the voice said. Connor Davis, Samantha's husband. The world tilted. The kitchen counters seemed to stretch out, the perspective warping like a funhouse mirror. Connor, the civil engineer, the man who coached Little League and waved at me when I drove past his house, the man whose wife was currently carrying my husband's child. Connor, I breathed. Hi. I found a receipt, he said. No preamble, no pleasantries, just raw, bleeding information. From the Motel 6 on the highway. It was in her car, under the passenger seat mat. I closed my eyes. Sloppy, Samantha. So sloppy. Okay, I said, keeping my voice low. I looked up at the ceiling, checking if Preston was still typing. I confronted her. Connor continued. His voice cracked. It was the sound of a man breaking in real time. She denied it at first, said it was for a friend, but I kept pushing. She broke down, Clara, she told me. What did she tell you? I asked. I needed to know the scope. Did he know about the baby? Did he know about the money? She said she's been seeing Preston. He spat the name like a curse word. For 6 months. She said they're in love. In love. The words hit me harder than I expected. Love implies a future. Love implies I was just an obstacle to be removed, not a partner to be respected. I'm coming over there, Connor said. The sadness in his voice was replaced by a sudden, jagged fury. I'm going to kill him. I'm getting in my truck right now. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. No, I hissed. Connor, stop. Do not come over here. Why not? He shouted. I pulled the phone away from my ear. He ruined my life. He's sleeping with my wife. I'm going to break his jaw. Because if you come over here now, I said, dropping my voice to a fierce whisper, you give him an out. An out? What are you talking about? Preston is a salesman, Connor, I said. He spins things. If you show up screaming, he'll call the police. He'll play the victim. He'll say you're crazy, that you're paranoid. He'll deny everything, and without hard proof right in his face, he might even make people believe him. I have the receipt. A receipt is paper, I said. He'll say he lent her money. He'll say he helped her with a flat tire. He will lie, and he is better at lying than you are at yelling. Connor fell silent. I could hear his breathing, heavy and ragged. I know, I said, softening my tone. I know how much it hurts. I found out on Tuesday. You knew? He whispered. You knew, and you didn't tell me? I'm building a case, I said. I'm a data analyst. I don't scream. I document. I have videos, Connor. I have bank statements. I have proof of $17,000 he stole from us to spend on her. I have everything. 17,000? He sounded faint. I'm hosting a block party on Saturday, I said. Preston thinks it's a celebration. He thinks he's safe. I'm going to project the evidence onto the fence. I'm going to show everyone exactly who they are. There was a long pause. I waited. I needed him to be on board. I needed his anger to be cold, not hot. Saturday? He asked. Noon, I said. I sent you an invite. You need to be there. And I need you to make sure Samantha is there. She won't come, he said. She's staying at her sister's, Melody's place. She left last night. Melody. Perfect. Then I'll handle Samantha, I said. You just show up. Can you do that? Can you wait 3 days to see him destroyed properly? He took a deep breath. It shuddered through the phone line. Saturday, he said. I'll be there. He hung up. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking. I felt like a hostage negotiator who had just talked a jumper off a ledge, only to realize I was standing on the ledge with him. I didn't waste time. If Samantha was at her sister's, she was hiding. She was licking her wounds. She might skip the party to avoid the awkwardness of seeing me. I couldn't let that happen. The reveal needed a villain. A trial needs a defendant. I opened Facebook. I searched for Melody's profile. I found her. Melody Jenkins. She posted a lot of inspirational quotes and photos of her golden retriever. I drafted a message. I had to channel the version of Clara that Samantha thought I was. Clueless, sweet, fragile Clara. Hi, Melody, I typed. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I'm Clara Harrington, Samantha's neighbor. We missed her at the walking group this morning. I deleted that. Too casual. Hi, Melody. I'm worried about Samantha. I saw her at the garden club and she seemed really down. She mentioned she might stay with you for a bit. I know life can be overwhelming. We're having our annual block party this Saturday. I'd love for her to come, even if just for an hour. Sometimes being around friends and good food is the best medicine. Preston and I would love to see her. Please tell her she's welcome. I read it over. It was dripping with toxic benevolence. It was the exact same weapon Samantha used on me. I'm so worried about you. It framed her attendance as a charity case, as a mental health intervention. If Samantha saw this, her ego wouldn't let her stay away. She wouldn't want to be the sad, depressed charity case. She would want to show up and prove she was fine. She would want to show up and gloat secretly in my face. I hit send. 10 minutes later, a reply popped up. Thanks, Clara. That's so sweet of you. She is going through a tough time right now. I'll bring her. I think getting out of the house would be good for her. Sweet. You have no idea, I whispered to the screen. Friday afternoon. Harold arrived at 3 o'clock sharp. He was carrying a large black duffel bag and looked like he was about to invade a small country. Preston was in the kitchen making hamburger patties. He was slapping the meat with unnecessary force, trying to regain some sense of control over his life by dominating ground beef. Harold, Preston called out, wiping grease on his apron. What's with the gear? We're not launching a missile, are we? He laughed. A loud, desperate laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Projection equipment, Harold said, not smiling. Clara asked me to set up a display for the community presentation. Preston frowned. He looked at me. I thought you said it was just a speech. Why do we need a projector? I was chopping onions. I didn't look up. Tears were stinging my eyes, which was convenient. It's for the nostalgia factor, honey, I said, sniffing. I pulled some old photos of the neighborhood, the first block party, the tree planting ceremony. People love that stuff. It reminds them why this community matters. Preston's chest puffed out a little. Community. Yeah, that's good. We need to remind people that the Harringtons are pillars of this community, especially, with the job situation. He lowered his voice on the last part, glancing at Harold. He was terrified the neighbors would find out he was fired. He wanted to play the successful car dealer one last time. "Exactly," I said. "This party is going to remind everyone exactly who we are." Harold caught my eye. He gave a microscopic nod. "I'll set up on the side fence," Harold said. "Best angle for the sun. I've got a 3,000 lumen projector. It'll be clear even in daylight." "Thanks, Harold," Preston said, dismissing him. "Just don't trip over the cooler." I watched Harold march into the backyard. He wasn't just setting up a projector, he was setting up the gallows. And Preston was too busy seasoning meat to notice the rope being measured for his neck. Saturday. I woke up at 6 in the morning. The sun was already pushing through the blinds, promising a day of oppressive, relentless heat. Preston was already up. I could hear him downstairs moving furniture. He was manic. I walked down in my robe. He was rearranging the patio chairs for the third time. He was wearing a polo shirt that was tucked in too tightly. He was sweating. "Morning, babe," he chirped. His eyes were wide and frantic. I was thinking, maybe we put the cooler by the gate so people grab a drink right when they walk in, lubricate the social gears? "Sure," I said, pouring coffee. My hand was steady. The anxiety had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, hard numbness. "I need this to go well, Clara," he said, stopping to look at me. He gripped the back of a lawn chair. "I need a lead. Henderson works at the bank, right? Maybe he knows about loan officer positions. And Miller is in logistics. I can do logistics." He was looking at me for reassurance. He wanted me to tell him he was hireable. He wanted me to tell him that his charm would save him, just like it always had. "You're good with people," I said. It wasn't a lie. He was great with people. He was just terrible with ethics. "Right," he nodded, pacing again. "I'm good with people. I just need an in. Once I get an interview, I'm gold. I need to perform today." Perform. That was his whole life. A performance. "Just be yourself," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "That's always been enough before." "Yeah," he breathed. "Yeah. Okay, I'm going to check the ice." He ran off toward the garage. I watched him go. He was a man running on fumes, powered by delusion and desperation. He thought he was fighting for a job. He didn't know he was fighting for his survival, and he had already lost. I went back upstairs to my office. I opened my laptop. I checked the presentation file one last time. Slide 1, Welcome to Meadowbrook. Slide 2, The Tree Planting. Slide 3, March 15th, The Driveway. I closed the laptop. I put on my dress. It was blue. Preston loved me in blue. He said it made me look innocent. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look innocent. I looked like a judge. Noon arrived with the force of a hammer. The heat was shimmering off the patio pavers. The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid filled the air. The doorbell rang. "I'll get it!" Preston yelled from the backyard. He was holding a spatula like a scepter. The first guests were the Robinsons. They brought potato salad and their 2 screaming toddlers. "Hey," Preston boomed, slapping Mike Robinson on the back. "Good to see you. Grab a beer. Clara made her famous dip." I smiled. My face hurt. "Hi, guys. Come on in." More people trickled in. The Millers, the Garcias, old Mrs. Higgins with her walker. By 12:30, the backyard was full. 30 people, 30 witnesses. Preston was working the room. I watched him. He was laughing too loud. He was touching people's shoulders too much. He was cornering Henderson by the drinks, probably pitching him on his transferable skills. At 12:40, the gate unlatched. I looked up. Connor walked in. He looked terrible. He was wearing sunglasses, but I could tell his eyes were swollen. He hadn't shaved. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days. Preston saw him. "Connor, buddy, didn't think you'd make it. Where's the better half?" I watched Connor's jaw clench. The muscles jumped under his skin. He took a breath. I could see him remembering my words. "Don't give him an out." "She's coming," Connor said. His voice was gravel. "She's with her sister." "Great," Preston beamed. "Grab a burger, man. You look like you need some protein." Preston turned back to Henderson. Connor walked over to me. He stood next to me by the dip bowl. "Is everything ready?" he asked. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the back of Preston's head with a look of pure hatred. "Harold has the remote," I said quietly. "Just wait, 20 minutes. "It feels like 20 years, he muttered. At 12:55, the gate opened again. Melody walked in first. She looked nervous. She was scanning the crowd, and then, behind her, came Samantha. She was wearing a long, flowy maxi dress. She had big sunglasses on. She looked pale. She looked hesitant. Preston turned. He saw her. For a second, his mask slipped. Panic flashed in his eyes. He hadn't expected her. He thought she was hiding. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me. I caught his eye. I smiled. A warm, loving, supportive wife smile. "Look, honey," I called out, loud enough for the group to hear. "Samantha made it. Isn't that great?" Preston froze. He had to smile. He had to play the part. "Yeah," he choked out. "Great." The trap was full. The doors were locked. I walked over to the patio table. I picked up a spoon and tapped it against my glass. Ding, ding, ding. "Everyone?" I called out. "If I could have your attention for a moment." The chatter died down. 30 faces turned toward me. Preston looked at me, sweating. Samantha looked at the ground. Connor looked at the projector screen. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Before we eat, I wanted to share a little something about what makes this neighborhood so special." I nodded at Harold. The projector whirred to life, a mechanical hum that cut through the backyard chatter. A square of light hit the white vinyl fence, washing out slightly in the midday sun until Harold adjusted the contrast. "We all know Meadowbrook is built on trust," I said, my voice carrying clear and steady. "It's built on knowing your neighbors, watching out for each other." The first image popped up. It was a grainy photo from 5 years ago, the annual Easter egg hunt. "Aw," Mrs. Higgins cooed, "look at little Timmy." Preston exhaled. I saw his shoulders drop 3 inches. He took a sip of his beer, flashing a relieved grin at Henderson. He thought I was doing exactly what I said. A nostalgia trip to stroke his ego. He thought he was safe. "But sometimes," I continued, my tone shifting just a fraction, "we miss things. Sometimes we're so busy looking at the big picture, we miss the details right in our own driveways." I nodded at Harold. Click. The screen flickered. The Easter egg hunt vanished. In its place appeared a high-definition video time-stamped March 15th. The crowd went quiet. Not the confused quiet of a bad joke, but the instinctive primal quiet of a herd sensing a predator. On the screen, Preston's BMW rolled into the driveway. The passenger door opened. Samantha stepped out. I heard a gasp. It came from Melody, Samantha's sister. On the screen, Preston walked around the car. He looked young. He looked unburdened. He reached out and tucked the hair behind Samantha's ear. It was a gesture of such casual, practiced intimacy that it felt like a slap in the face to every person watching. Then, they kissed. It wasn't a peck. It was a lingering, hungry kiss. The kind of kiss you don't give a neighbor. Preston dropped his beer. The bottle hit the patio pavers and shattered, beer foaming over his expensive loafers. The sound was like a gunshot. "What?" Preston stammered. He looked at the screen, then at me, his eyes bulging. "Clara, what is this?" "It's community data, honey," I said, my voice dripping with sweet, poisonous concern. "I thought we were celebrating our life here. This is part of your life, isn't it?" "Turn it off," Preston shouted. He lunged toward Harold. "Turn it off right now. It's a joke. It's a deep fake." Harold didn't flinch. He just stood in front of the projector table, crossing his arms over his chest. Harold had faced down enemy combatants. He wasn't afraid of a car salesman in a polo shirt. "Sit down, Preston," Harold rumbled. "It's not what it looks like," Preston yelled, spinning to face the crowd. His face was a map of panic. Sweat was already beading on his upper lip. She's been under a lot of stress. She's reimagining things. This is insane. Reimagining? I asked, stepping closer to him. Am I reimagining the 112 hours you spent with her? Am I reimagining the Motel 6 on the highway? No, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You're crazy. You're manic. You haven't been taking your meds. There it was, the final card in his deck, the crazy wife defense. I don't take meds, Preston, I said calmly, but you might need some after you see the next slide. I signaled Harold. Click. The screen changed. It was the Starbucks video, the zoom lens shot, Samantha sitting at the table, the ultrasound photo sliding across the metal surface, Preston's hand covering hers, the look of pure, unadulterated joy on his face. Oh my God, someone whispered. I think it was Brenda from the garden club. Samantha let out a sob, a high, thin sound that cut through the tension. She covered her face with her hands. She's pregnant? Henderson asked, looking from the screen to Preston. Preston, is she pregnant? Preston opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the screen, staring at the evidence of his own double life. He couldn't deny the baby. The baby was a biological fact. Congratulations, by the way, I said to Samantha, who was now shaking in her chair. I know you were cleansing on Thursday. I guess we know what you're really detoxing from now. Decency? Clara, stop, Preston pleaded. His voice broke. He wasn't yelling anymore, he was begging. Please, not here. We can talk about this inside. Why inside? I asked, feigning confusion. You spent the money outside. You spent it at the Ritz-Carlton. You spent it at Nordstrom. Money? Mike Robinson asked. What money? I'm so glad you asked, Mike, I said. Click. The spreadsheet appeared. It was a wall of numbers, but I had helpfully highlighted the totals in bright red. These are Preston's expenses from the last 6 months, I narrated, pointing at the fence like a weather girl reporting a hurricane. $17,000. $17,000, Mrs. Higgins repeated, clutching her pearls. That's our savings, I said. That's the money for the roof repair. That's the money for the AC unit that broke on Tuesday. But it didn't go to the house. It went here. I pointed to the line items. $1,400 at Motel 6, $5,000 at jewelry stores, $300 at a spa while I was home ironing his shirts. The crowd's mood shifted instantly. Infidelity is juicy. Theft is disgusting. These people worked hard. They paid mortgages. They understood the value of $1. Seeing a man steal $17,000 from his wife turned their shock into revulsion. And the best part? I continued, looking directly at Preston. He didn't just steal from me. He stole from Thompson Motors. Preston flinched as if I'd hit him. That's why he was fired on Tuesday, I announced, not because of an accounting error, but because I brought these spreadsheets to Gregory Thompson. Preston is unemployed, broke, and currently facing potential embezzlement charges. Preston sank into a lawn chair. His legs just gave out. He sat there staring at the grass, the broken beer bottle foaming around his feet. That's enough, a voice growled. Connor stepped forward. He had been standing by the dip bowl like a statue, but now he moved. He walked over to where Samantha was crying. He didn't touch her. He stood over her. Connor, Samantha wept, reaching for his hand. Connor, please. He pulled his hand away. Don't. He turned to look at Preston. The look on his face was terrifyingly calm. I filed the divorce papers yesterday, Connor announced to the silent yard. My lawyer will be in touch with yours, Samantha, if you can afford one. But the baby, Samantha wailed. We have a family. That's not my family, Connor said. He pointed at Preston. That's his family, and he can pay for it. I'm not spending a dime on another man's mistake. He looked at me. He nodded once. A warrior acknowledging a fellow soldier on the battlefield. Good luck, Clara, he said. Then he turned and walked out the gate. He didn't look back. Melody stood up. She looked furious, but not at me. She grabbed Samantha's arm. "Get up!" Melody hissed. "We are leaving. Now." "But Preston." Samantha looked at him. She wanted him to stand up. She wanted him to be the hero. Preston didn't move. He was staring at the spreadsheet on the fence, watching his life dissolve into red digits. "He can't help you," I said to Samantha. "He can't even pay for his own beer." Melody dragged Samantha out of the yard. The gate clicked shut. It was just us now. Me, Preston, and 30 stunned neighbors. Preston looked up at me. His eyes were red, wet, and pathetic. "Clara," he whispered, "where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe Motel 6 has a weekly rate?" I reached into the pocket of my dress. I pulled out a folded stack of papers. "These are for you," I said, dropping them onto his lap. "What is this?" he asked, picking them up with trembling hands. "Divorce petition," I said. "And an emergency protective order granting me exclusive use of the residence due to financial dissipation of marital assets. My lawyer was very aggressive." "Exclusive use?" He blinked. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm not kicking you out," I said. "The state of Texas is kicking you out. You have—" I checked my watch. 0 minutes to vacate the premises." He looked around. "But my stuff—" "Harold?" I called out. Harold reached under the projector table and pulled out a single cardboard box. He walked over and set it on the ground next to Preston. "I packed your essentials," Harold said. "Toothbrush, underwear, laptop, and that sales award you like so much." Preston looked at the box. Then he looked at the neighbors. He saw Henderson shaking his head. He saw Mrs. Higgins looking at him with pure disgust. He saw that there was no charm left in the world that could fix this. He stood up. He picked up the box. "You planned this," he said to me. His voice was dull, shocky. "You planned all of it." "Yes," I said. "I'm a data analyst, Preston. I analyzed the problem, and I executed a solution." He didn't say anything else. He turned and walked toward the gate. He looked small. He looked like a man who had been stripped of everything that made him human. His money, his reputation, his lies. He walked out. We heard the BMW start up in the driveway. It revved once, then faded down the street. The silence in the backyard was heavy. Then Tessa Miller cleared her throat. "So," she said, looking at the spreadsheet still glowing on the fence, "does this mean the dip is still available?" A laugh rippled through the crowd. It was a nervous, release valve kind of laugh, but it broke the spell. "The dip is definitely available," I said, my knees finally starting to shake. "And I think there's plenty of beer. Preston isn't drinking it." People started moving. They came up to me. They didn't know what to say, so they just squeezed my shoulder or nodded. "That was—" Henderson trailed off. "That was something, Clara." "He stole from the dealership?" Mike asked. "Seriously?" "Every dime," I said. Harold walked over to me. He started coiling up the power cord for the projector. "Good presentation," he said quietly. "Thanks, Harold," I said. I felt a tear finally slide down my cheek. Couldn't have done it without the AV department. "Any time," he said. "I made you a copy of the drive." For the lawyers. I looked at the empty gate where my husband had just walked out of my life forever. I took a deep breath of the hot, charcoal-scented air. I was alone. I was broke. My air conditioner was held together by a credit card charge I couldn't afford, but I was free. I picked up my glass of wine. I took a long, slow sip. It tasted like victory. It has been 90 days since the barbecue, and the fallout has been spectacular. My divorce was finalized last week. Because of the financial dissipation clause and the undeniable proof of the $17,000 he stole, the judge awarded me the house and the majority of our remaining assets. Preston got his BMW, his debt, and his freedom. He is currently living in a rented room above a garage in Pflugerville. He couldn't get another job in car sales. Apparently, word travels fast when you embezzle from Gregory Thompson. He is now selling solar panels door to door. I saw his LinkedIn profile the other day. He describes himself as a renewable energy consultant. Samantha had the baby 2 weeks ago. A girl. I heard through the grapevine that she is living with her mother. Connor went through with the divorce. He kept their house. He's dating a nice teacher from the elementary school. As for me, I got promoted. My boss called me in a week after the incident. I thought he was going to reprimand me for taking the sick days. Instead, he told me that Gregory Thompson had called him. Gregory told him that my forensic audit of Preston's expenses was the most thorough takedown he had ever seen. My boss put me in charge of the internal compliance team. I got a 20% raise. I used the first paycheck to pay off the AC repair. I also repainted the front door. It's no longer terracotta. It is now a bright, violent shade of teal. The HOA hates it. Harold says it looks like freedom. Sometimes I sit on my back porch and look at the fence where I projected the end of my marriage. I don't feel sad. I don't feel angry. I just feel efficient. I learned something important this year. People think the opposite of love is hate. It isn't. The opposite of love is data, and the data never lies. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.